Welcome to Movie Night with stormpinball. I'm your host, Sean the Storm Grant. Tonight we're talking about The King of Staten Island, a brand new dramedy directed by Judd Apatow and starring Pete Davidson, Bill Burr, Marissa Tomei, and Bel Powley. I have a unique format to my movie reviews. They're divided into two parts. The first is the ticket booth. The ticket booth is a spoiler-free zone. Personally, before I see a movie, I want to know very little about it. I want to experience the movie the way the creators meant it to be seen. So I hate spoilers, and I want to know as little as possible about even the basics of the plot. What I do want to know is the answer to these two questions. Number one, is it any good? And number two, is there anything I should know as far as my own expectations are concerned that will help me enjoy the movie more? These are the questions that I would usually ask one of my friends that had seen the movie before me, because I know that they give me only the information that I was looking for to help me decide whether or not I should buy a ticket to the movie and how I could have the best mindset going into it if I did. So that's the information that I'll tell you about in the ticket booth section. And if you decide that you want to see the movie, that's all that you should watch before you do. The second part of my movie review are the after movie drinks. This replicates when you go to a nearby bar and discuss the movie fully with your friends after having just seen it, going into complete detail about what worked for you and what you didn't like. To me, this is a more useful format for a review of a movie because it gives you the info that you need to make an informed decision about whether or not you want to see it, and then give you a full explanation as to what I thought about it after. So let's get this thing started and head to the ticket booth for The King of Staten Island. Should you buy a ticket to The King of Staten Island? That would be a resounding yes. It's a historic ticket booth because this is the first major movie made for adults that would have been released in theaters, but due to the pandemic instead has been made available on demand for $19.99. The first movie to be released this way was Trolls World Tour. The movie posters and promotional ad purchases had already been made before COVID hit. So the studio executives at Universal Pictures made the call to go ahead and release the movie to the home market at the $19.99 price, usually specific to going to the movie theater, for a party of two. It was a very profitable decision. In the first 3 weeks of digital release, Trolls World Tour made more money than the original Trolls movie had made in its first 5 months of theatrical release. Could this be the end of the theater experience as we know it? Could be, but I hope not. I don't think it's old-fashioned to enjoy the feel of seeing a movie on a big screen, especially an IMAX one, despite the advances in home theaters. The movie industry may be doing extremely well for the studios lately, but that success hasn't translated to the physical theaters, with films like the Star Wars series demanding large cuts of the box office that the theaters would have to sell out for weeks in order to make just a slim margin. The rise of Netflix and Amazon making original content also has jeopardized movie theaters. And all of this was going down before the coronavirus pandemic became an even bigger threat to the theater experience as we know it. So this is the environment surrounding the on-demand theatrical release of King of Staten Island. Released into a world with a devastated economy and violent racial and political tensions to an audience who has figured out how to listen to music and play games on their phones for free. Will it be a success? Most assuredly so, because it is a truly quality film. The one ace in the hole that this movie has, outside of its excellent writers, directors, and actors, is a captive audience that could definitely use a laugh. If you want to see a very well-written and acted film, go ahead and buy the ticket. I'm very glad that I did. As far as expectations, just know this. It's more of a dramedy than a comedy. It's still funny, but it's at its funniest when it isn't trying to be. The runtime of over 2 hours would probably seem long in a theater, considering that you'd probably get there early for a good seat and then would have about 20 minutes of ads and previews before the movie started. But the longer runtime actually works well when you watch it from home. I bet they might have actually trimmed about 15 minutes of the movie away had they released it in theaters to increase profitability by having additional showtimes. So the home release probably helped in the release of a better cut of the film. The acting is excellent, the story is believable, and the quality of the overall craftsmanship is apparent. If you've seen the trailers, you should have a pretty good idea of what you're getting. but I will say that it's done extremely well, and as I mentioned earlier, the moments when it's trying to be funny aren't as funny as when the humor comes from the context of the story, especially in the second half. It will be interesting to see what Pete Davidson does next, since this is his 8 Mile, or Trainwreck, which was also shot in Staten Island and Apatow also directed. In that, the story parallels very closely with Davidson's own life. But as for this movie, he should have a big hit on his hands. Go check it out, and then come back for the after theater drinks, and we'll go through it in detail. Welcome to the after theater drinks. If you bought the ticket on my advice, I definitely hope that you enjoyed the movie. Let's talk about it. Full disclosure. Spoilers ahoy. I'll admit that the opening of the movie had me a little bit worried. I know that the car crash scene was meant to establish Scott's mental state, but it was reckless and severe enough to make me initially dislike the character. I was worried that he may have killed or severely injured someone in the crash he caused, and I didn't like how he blew that off. The next sequence of scenes is enjoyable enough. We're introduced to Scott's group of friends, and the dialogue is decent and funny. Next, we learn about his relationship with Kelsey, his girlfriend, and we meet his mom and his sister. We learn that Scott is aimless, still grieving his firefighter father's death while on the job. His behavior is realistic and believable, but it could have been tough to watch had Apatow not done such an excellent job of balancing the grating nature of his moping, sad sack demeanor with making him accessible and sympathetic. The first standout scene is his sister's graduation. Pete Davidson's actual grandfather steals the scene with his punchline, and it was then that I was truly put at ease as far as watching this movie. The movie continues to pick up for me with the introduction of Harold and his father Ray. The overall casting of this film is superb, because not only do you have 3-time nominated, 1-time Oscar winner Marissa Tomei as the mother, you have Bill Burr, who is an extremely good dramatic actor, on top of being one of the most talented stand-up comedians in the game. The last time I saw him, he was a bounty hunter on The Mandalorian, and he is killed in that role too. So he definitely has range. But I believe that after this performance, we will be seeing Burr get a lot more major film work, comedic and otherwise. Even though he's done a lot of great work in the past, I see this movie as his coming out party. The success of this film should take his career to the next level. Outside of the leads, the excellent casting decisions don't end. The casting directors Gail Keller and David Rubin populated the entire roster with stars for both the minor characters and cameo roles. Steve Buscemi seems completely underutilized until his poignant monologue about Scott's father, which was a high point in the entire movie. Pamela Adlon is perfect as Ray's ex-wife. I especially love the scene where she hands the kids off to Scott the first time, and she asks, "Are you weird?" And after he replies yes, she says he must be okay because a weird person would say no. And after he replies yes, she says he must be okay because only a weird person would say no. That's exactly how that would play out in real life. There are also great cameos from Action Bronson, Machine Gun Kelly, Rich Voss, Dominic Lombardozzi, and Nana Mensah. It's interesting that you see all-star casts more often in comedies than any other genre of film. I just watched Andy Samberg's Popstar, and it was filled with talent as well, even in the minor roles. Another tonal balance which is successful in this movie is the fact that once Scott starts heading down the right path, everything doesn't magically get better. Scott's never a bad person, he's just a sad one. He's honest to a fault to his suffering girlfriend, played by Belle Powley, an English actress who perfectly morphs into her Staten Island accent and role. He's a better father to Ray's kids than Ray is, just by talking to them and being interested in them as he walks them to 2 different schools. But he still doesn't know what to do with himself. He is smart enough to not want to get involved with his friends robbing the pharmacy, and he's lucky that he didn't get arrested when they finally try and screw it up. He enjoys it when he visits his sister in college, but doesn't know how he could have that life because he's already drifted so far behind. It's frustrating to watch Scott flail in life, and that's the primary source of the conflict and tension. But it's handled well enough that it doesn't get so annoying that I started to lose interest. When Scott finally betrays Ray and they fight by the pool, you have to give Ray credit. Even though things came out about his past from his ex-wife, who would be the worst person to ask but the best if you were digging for dirt, Ray still maintains his composure. he dumps him into the pool rather than wrecking him for real. He shows incredible patience, especially considering the stunts that Scott has been pulling throughout their history. He still gets busted for laying hands on him at all, though, by Scott's mom, Margie, but you get the sense he didn't completely burn that bridge. As an audience member, I got the sense that both men would eventually work things out, and I was looking forward to seeing that happen, but it's handled in a way that isn't too sweet to be saccharine. The reason that the majority of these scenes work in this film is because the characters talk and act in a realistic way. They're not perfect, they all make plenty of mistakes, but they're mistakes that the audience could easily believe people would make in similar circumstances. The hardest thing to believe is actually the amount of patience that Ray and Scott's family have with Scott. A lot of moms would have told Scott to get a job and his act together long ago, and a lot of men would have put up with Scott's behavior for a while and then finally given up. Luckily, Scott starts putting his life together, and he's lucky that his father's legacy leads the fire company to take him under their wing. The movie ends in a positive and believable way as well. While Scott does do right by his girl, it's not like he became a fire chief or even a probie when the movie ends. It's a good sign when you can watch a movie for over 2 hours and still feel like the ending is slightly abrupt and you're left wanting more. Drawbacks and criticisms. I mentioned earlier that this movie is at its funniest when it's not trying to be. Therefore, I wish the scenes in the restaurant and with his gang were a little bit funnier. They seem like missed opportunities even though the cast was talented. I was also surprised that the soundtrack had a couple of rap songs by Kid Cudi and Fabulous, but that it was shot in Staten Island and didn't have a Wu-Tang song on it. I think there was some woo-wear in there though. Overall, I give this movie a 93 out of 100. I think that the acting and the realism and the overall craftsmanship of all involved led to a truly successful film. They made this about as good as it could be made, and I'd be happy to watch it again sometime down the road. What did you think? Were the high points and low points that I mentioned the same for you? I welcome your honest opinion. Representing hard work and talent, this is Storm Pinball signing out. Thanks for joining me for a movie night.